You're 17 years old and sitting in seat number 24 on a Boeing 737 somewhere in the skies over the Midwest. But you're not doing what the other passengers are doing. The passengers are looking at their phones. Passengers sleep with their mouths open. Passengers look at the screen on the back of the seat. You're not doing any of those things. You've pressed your forehead against the oval window, almost touching the cold plastic, and you're watching the wing. You're not just looking, you're watching it. There's a difference, and even though no one has told you there's such a difference, you've already understood it. During turbulence, the wing flexes slightly, and the plane begins to bank gently, just as the man next to you grips the armrest tightly. Instead of gripping the armrest tightly yourself, you feel something that doesn't yet have a name, stirring in your chest. It's not exactly excitement. It's not exactly curiosity either. It's closer to a sense of recognition. It's as if you're meeting someone for the first time, even though, without realizing it, you've been waiting for them. The plane lands. You walk through the jet bridge along with the crowd, and then you stop. Right there in the terminal, you stop, turn around, and look out the windows at the plane waiting at the gate. The ground crew, in their orange vests and headsets, moves around the plane with the calm efficiency of people who are exactly where they're supposed to be. Then the two pilots step out. They pull their wheeled suitcases behind them, their uniforms crisply pressed, and move through the terminal just like everyone else. They don't draw any attention to themselves. They simply stand there in a silence you've never experienced up close before. Something inside you clicks into place. You don't tell anyone anything. You go home, sit down at your computer, and start reading. You learn that becoming an airline pilot costs between $80,000 and $100,000 before you even sit in the cockpit of a commercial airplane. You realize you need 1,500 flight hours for a U.S. airline to even consider your application. You'll learn that the medical requirements are strict and that a single misreported diagnosis on a form could close a door you've spent years working to open. You'll read all of this, but it won't discourage you. On the contrary, you'll feel even more confident. The challenge isn't a warning, it's a confirmation. You find a flight school and walk in one Saturday morning. A man with a gray mustache, whose eyes hold 30 years of sky, leads you to a Cessna 172 that smells of aviation gasoline and old leather, straps you into the left seat, and disappears below deck. For 45 minutes, you're no longer a penniless, aimless young man. You belong here. You step out of the plane. The man asks if you'd like to do it again. Before he can finish the sentence, you say, yes. You're walking home in silence. You don't turn on the radio or call anyone because you need the silence to process what just happened, and you're not ready to share it yet. Because sharing it might diminish it, and right now it mustn't be diminished. It needs to stay exactly as big as it is right now. This is where it all begins. Not with a driver's license, a logbook, a framed certificate, or an epaulet on your shoulder. No matter how hard you try, it begins with a feeling you can't shake, and you won't try to, because this is the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to you, even on days when you don't feel that way. The sky is no longer just something hovering above your head. It's something created for you. You're not yet sure whether this means you belong to it or it belongs to you, but you'll find out. It won't be quick. It won't be easy. It won't come without a price, but you'll find out. You'll spend the next 40 years figuring this out. You're 19 now, and you're broke in a way only young pilots can understand. You're not broke because of bad decisions. You're broke because even the right decisions still manage to drain everything you had. Flight training costs an exorbitant amount, enough to seem ruthless for someone your age. Hobbs charges $40 an hour. Training costs $60. Expenses pile up faster than the hours go by, while the hours pass more slowly than your money runs out. And that's how you learn to live. You get a job at a restaurant. On Friday and Saturday nights, you clear tables, carry dishes, and smile at people who'll never know you're going to fly a plane. On Tuesday and Thursday mornings, you fly before the air warms up and study at the kitchen table until the words blur and the coffee next to your hand goes cold. Your first solo flight takes place on a Tuesday morning in October. Your instructor gets out of the plane at the engine prep area without any fanfare and tells you to fly 3 circuits and bring the plane back. Then he walks away. There you sit, the engine running, static, crackling over the radio, and the right seat empty. The weight of that empty seat is a physical thing, something you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. You taxi toward the runway. You go over the checklist. You push the throttle forward. The plane accelerates, takes off, and feels lighter than ever. Your mind perceives this as either the best decision you've ever made or your final one. Then the fear passes, just like a change in the weather, and what lies beneath is clarity. A cold, clean, and electric clarity. You complete the flight path. You land. The instructor shakes your hand and says nothing else because nothing else is needed. You're getting your private pilot's license, and that evening you take off on your own and fly over your hometown. You look down at the streets below, and everything looks smaller from up here, but it's all in sharper focus. The problem is that a private pilot's license is just a training permit. Airlines require 1,500 hours of flight experience. You've completed the first 200 hours of that 1,500-hour journey, and you're almost out of money. You take on a second job loading trucks on the night shift. You sleep for 4 hours. You fly in the mornings. You study at night. Your friends are furnishing their apartments and going to parties. Meanwhile, you're eating peanut butter sandwiches straight from the jar and jotting down your flight times in a spiral notebook in a single column with small increments that gradually rise towards something you can feel but haven't yet touched. No one tells you that this is the hardest part. Everyone says the flight exams are the hardest part. They're wrong. The hardest part is the years between your dream and your destination. Nothing in the outside world confirms that what you're doing makes any logical sense. Everyone you know is making visible progress, while yours isn't visible yet. And you have to carry the awareness of what you're building entirely within yourself, because there's nowhere else to put it yet. You're 22 years old. You have your instrument rating, your commercial pilot license, and 300 flight hours. But the airlines require 1,500 hours. So you go back to the flight school run by the man with the gray mustache and become a certified flight instructor. On your first day, he shakes your hand and tells you to be patient with your students because they're all terrified and they don't yet know that this fear will pass. You teach 5 days a week, sometimes 6. Every day for 3 or 4 hours, you're in the air in small planes with students who grip the controls tightly and stare at the instruments instead of the horizon. You're teaching a retired accountant named Gerald, who's been dreaming of flying since he was 12. After his first solo flight, he's quietly crying because he's 58 and thought that door had long since closed, but it hadn't. You're teaching a 20-year-old student named Priya, who was smarter than you were at her age, whose ability to read instrument panels is already more precise than that of most pilots with 200 hours under their belt, and who will almost certainly reach the cockpit of a major airline before you do. Flying doesn't fit anyone's schedule, and the sooner a student realizes this, the better prepared they'll be for everything this profession demands of them. Hours pass. Some days this accumulation feels like progress, while on other days, standing at the bottom of something immense and looking up, you feel as if you're understanding the true meaning of the word immense for the first time. You reach 500 hours, then 700. You apply to regional airlines and get rejected. You update your application. You apply again. You pass the written exam. You go for an interview in a conference room in a building near an airport you've never flown to before. You wear a tie and answer questions about your decision-making process, your CRM philosophy, why you want to fly for this airline, and what you would do if your captain asked you to do something you thought was unsafe? You answer honestly because you've been thinking about this question for years, and you know the answer isn't what sounds good, it's what you actually do. You receive a conditional job offer. You begin ground training. For 6 weeks, you sit in a classroom memorizing the systems of a jet that makes everything you've flown so far seem like child's play. You step into the simulator. The simulator isn't what you expected. It's much better than you expected. It moves and shakes. The visual system displays weather conditions that feel realistic. The instructor in the ejection seat disables the systems without warning and asks you to perform approach flights under conditions severe enough to ground most general aviation pilots. And you do it because that's your job, and you've been preparing for this all along. You pass a type rating exam. You begin your flight as a second pilot on an Embraer 145. Your captain is a woman named Diane who has been flying for 22 years and speaks very little at first. When you land at your first destination, she tells you the landing was solid, says she'll be waiting for you at the gate, and gets off the plane. After she leaves, you take the right-hand seat, look out the windshield at the ramp, and in that moment, you feel an emotion you can't quite put into words. For 4 years, you'll be assigned to regional flights. Sitting in the right seat of a 50-seat jet, you'll log your flight hours and learn things that can't be taught in a classroom or a simulator. You'll learn that the cockpit is a small room where two people spend long hours together under pressure, and that the atmosphere in that room determines the safety of everyone on board. You'll learn that a tired captain who's been on duty for 11 hours and is trying to get home is a different person from the same captain on the first day of a double shift, and that your role in the right seat includes managing this dynamic without making it worse. 4 years later, you're promoted to captain on regional flights, a turboprop aircraft, 48 seats. You sit in the left seat for the first time as the pilot in command of a commercial flight, and the weight of that seat feels completely different from the one on the right. Not heavier, more distinct. From now on, the right seat is definitely yours. Your personal life during this period consists of a series of negotiations between who you are and the schedule you're living by. You'll miss some important days, birthdays, a funeral, a first step. You'll call from hotel rooms, talk to a face on a phone screen, and try to be there by bridging a distance that's not just geographical. Some of what you miss can never be recovered. You understand this. Most pilots think, I wish I'd realized this sooner. This profession selects people who are willing to accept this cost, or who haven't yet grasped its full extent. You understood the magnitude of this cost and chose this path anyway. You don't regret your choice, but you've never claimed that this cost isn't real. You're going in for an interview at a major airline. You have 4,000 flight hours under your belt. You prepare for the interview just as you would for any check flight. That is thoroughly. You leave nothing to chance. You know there might be some things you haven't quite nailed, but you walk into that room exactly as you are. You get the job offer. You go back to school. You earn your type rating on the 737. Once again, you join the flight crew as a second pilot, returning to the right seat, because that's how major airlines operate. At a new company, on a new aircraft, in a new seat, you start from scratch, and the seniority you earned at the regional airline means absolutely nothing here. You find yourself at the very bottom of a list containing thousands of names, and everything is determined at the bottom of that list. The flights you'll be assigned, your days off, and the years you'll spend before reaching the position you want. For 6 years, you'll fly in the right-hand seat. Since your family lives in a city that isn't a base, you'll be commuting back and forth. Moving to be with them is a topic you'll never bring up again. When the travel schedules don't work out, you'll live in temporary housing between flights. This place is a 3-bedroom apartment with 14 pilot bunks, a bathroom usage schedule, and a culture of professional transience that you both understand and can never quite get used to. In your 7th year with a major airline, you're promoted to captain on the 737. the left seat again, that weight again. This time it's more tangible because the plane is bigger, the routes are longer, and there are 189 passengers. You're the person listed on the passenger manifest as the pilot in command. And that's not just an abstract concept. You're on your first long haul flight across the Pacific in a 777. The ocean stretches in every direction beyond the horizon. You're 6 hours away from the nearest alternative airport. It's night, and the sky is filled with stars that no one on the ground can see from this angle. And you're feeling something you haven't felt since you pressed your face against the window when you were 17. But now, over the world's largest ocean, in the left seat of a wide-body aircraft at 37,000 feet, you're flying over the world's largest ocean, and this feeling is no less intense. It's bigger. It's the same thing that began in row 24 of a 737 over the Midwest. It grew with you and is still growing. You never imagined it could be this big. You're grateful. You're in the moment, and you wouldn't trade this moment for anything offered to you. That was the whole problem. That was the whole point. You're 44 years old, and the airline has asked you to become a check pilot. Now you're evaluating other pilots. During flight checks, you sit in the jump seat. During proficiency evaluations, you sit in the simulator. You observe how pilots fly under pressure, what they're thinking, and how they communicate with their crew. You write reports that will be added to their personnel files and influence the course of their careers. You see captains who are technically flawless, but who interrupt the first officers, making the cockpit feel cramped and dangerous. You see first officers who are so obedient that they won't speak up when there's a problem, and that silence brings flights to an end. It's not a bad flight. It's a silence. Someone saw something but said nothing, or they said something but weren't heard. You spend just as much time teaching people how to bring up difficult topics in the cockpit as you do teaching them the procedures. You have difficult conversations with pilots whose performance falls short of standards. The process of recommending that someone be removed from flight duty is the most uncomfortable task you'll face in this career, and you do it because it must be done. A pilot who fails to meet performance standards is not a personal failure that needs to be protected. That pilot is a risk to everyone on board. Yet you continue with the flight because you have no choice. A flight captain who is relieved of duty loses touch with what the flight assignment actually entails. Your body is quite exhausted. On a long duty day, your hands need to feel the crosswind. While sitting in the reserve seat and watching someone else handle it, your body needs that sensation. You're 51 years old, serving as chief pilot. You have an office at the airline's headquarters, and your schedule is planned by staff weeks in advance. Your decisions affect every pilot flying under your certification. There are 2,000 of them. Perhaps you know 200 by name. Perhaps you've shaken hands with 400. The rest are simply names on a list, and you are responsible for all of them. Every single one, in a way that doesn't end when you leave the office. You set the training standards. You investigate incidents. You testify before the FAA. When a problem arises, you sit across from the lawyers and explain what happened, why it happened, and what will change. When pressure from above forces you to accept a standard that jeopardizes safety, you stand your ground. Because your name is on the certificate, your pilots are sitting in the cockpits, and the passengers in the back, even if they aren't aware of it, are in fact entrusting their lives to you. You miss flying just as you would miss a language you once spoke without a second thought. That language that divides the world into categories visible only from your perspective. The muscle memory is still there. In the simulator, it comes back instantly every 6 months. Before your mind can catch up, your hands already know exactly what to do. But your daily connection to the plane is gone, and the part of your identity that took shape around that connection over 30 years has had to find new ground. The pilots who work for you trust you because you too come from exactly where they are. You know the smell of temporary lodging. You know how much the commute costs. You know what it means to spend Thanksgiving alone at a doorstep in a city where you don't know a soul. You reflect this in every decision you make, and you try never to take it for granted. You are 65 years old, and the FAA says you are done. The mandatory retirement age for airline pilots in the United States is 65, and the rule does not care that your last simulator check was excellent. It does not care that you feel exactly as sharp as you did at 55, or that you have 28,000 hours and have never had a serious incident. The rule is the rule, and your certificate expires on your birthday, and that is the end. Your last flight is a red eye from Los Angeles to New York. You tell nobody on the crew because you want no ceremony. You want to fly it the way you flew every other one, with full attention and full presence and nothing sentimental between you and the work. You push the thrust levers forward in the dark, and the 737 accelerates and lifts, and Los Angeles recedes below you. You let Kayla, now a captain herself with 12,000 hours, fly most of the cruise while you work the radio. You watch her and feel something that takes a moment to name. Pride, yes, but also continuity. The thing that was handed to you is being handed forward. You take the controls back for the arrival into JFK. The sun is just beginning at the horizon over the Atlantic, orange and exact, and you fly the ILS, and the runway comes up out of the dark, and you land the aircraft for the last time, smooth, on speed, on center line, and you taxi to the gate and run the shutdown checklist, and the engine spool down to silence, and you sit in that silence for 1 full minute. 40 years, 28,000 hours, hundreds of cities, thousands of passengers who never learned your name and were never supposed to. You pick up your bag and walk off the aircraft, and behind you, the gate agent is already scanning boarding passes for the next crew. The machine does not pause. It was never supposed to pause. You sit on your porch in the weeks after and drink coffee in the mornings, and the stillness is enormous, not unpleasant, just larger than anything you have sat inside in decades. Your knees ache from a million jet bridge miles. Your body carries the work the way all working bodies carry the work they have done, quietly and without complaint until it doesn't. Your children are grown. 2 of them became pilots. One swore she never would because she saw from the inside what the career costs a family, and you understand that choice completely, and you do not argue her out of it. Sometimes the right thing is to see clearly what a life costs and decide that cost belongs to someone else. You take out your logbook sometimes, not to read it, just to hold it. And the weight of it in your hands is something specific that you do not have better words for than weight. You would not trade any of it. Not the crash pad, or the peanut butter sandwiches, or the Christmases in Omaha, or the long night over the Pacific when the engine went quiet, or the hard conversation with the pilot who was not ready, or the last red-eye that nobody else on the crew knew was the last one. Not a single hour of any of it. But you would not sell it to someone else without telling them the full truth about what it takes and what it costs, and what it keeps taking long after you think you have already paid. The bill arrives in forms you did not anticipate. In the face of a partner who learned to stop waiting up. In a child who grew up knowing your absence as a kind of weather, normal and impersonal, and not directed at them, but felt all the same. In the weight of a folded flag at a funeral you did not expect to attend this decade. You pay all of it. You paid it across 40 years in currencies you did not know existed when you were 17 with your face against the window. You would pay it again, every dollar of it. Tonight, somewhere over the Midwest, a 17-year-old is sitting in row 24 of a Boeing 737, and they are not doing what passengers do. They are pressed against the oval window, watching the wing flex in the turbulence, and something is beginning in their chest that they will not have words for until they have spent years looking for them. Nobody around them notices. Nobody is supposed to notice yet. But something is beginning that will take 40 years and cost more than money and demand more than willpower and ask for things that have not been named yet. It will end on a porch somewhere with coffee and silence and a logbook too heavy to carry and a sky going about its business overhead, indifferent and enormous and still, after all of it, still belonging to them. It always belonged to them. They just had to earn the right to know it. The cycle continues.